After she cheated, she dared me. What are you going to do? Complain to my parents? I said, no, I wouldn't do that. Instead, I sent her very religious father one anonymous text. The address to the hotel room his daughter was staying in with her lover. I, 32M, never thought I'd become the kind of person who'd destroy someone's life with a single text message. But then again, I never thought my wife would cheat on me in the most brazen way possible. We'd been married for 4 years. Met in college, dated for 3, married after I landed a stable job in accounting. She came from money, old money, the kind that came with expectations and reputations to maintain. Her father was a deacon at their church, the type who quoted scripture at dinner parties and had opinions about everything from politics to what color socks were appropriate for Sunday service. Her mother hosted charity galas and served on the board of their country club. They'd never particularly liked me. I was middle class, unremarkable, safe, but I made their daughter happy, and that had been enough. Or so I thought. The first sign came 3 months ago. She started working late. Project deadlines, she said. Client meetings that ran long. I didn't question it because I trusted her, and also because I was usually buried in spreadsheets myself during tax season. We'd always had our own careers, our own lives that intersected at home. It worked for us. Then came the gym membership she suddenly needed. 5 days a week, sometimes 6. She'd come home flushed and energized, talking about endorphins and personal records. I was happy she'd found something she enjoyed. I even bought her new workout gear for her birthday. The phone calls started next. She'd step into another room, voice dropping to a murmur. When I walked in, she'd wrap up quickly, claiming it was a colleague or her sister. Her phone developed a password I didn't know. Not that I'd ever snooped before, but it felt deliberate, like a line being drawn. I told myself I was being paranoid. Marriage required trust. I focused on work, on being supportive, on planning the vacation to Costa Rica we'd been talking about. But the distance grew. She stopped initiating anything physical. Stopped asking about my day. We became roommates who occasionally ate dinner together. The truth arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. I'd left work early with a migraine. Something that rarely happened, but the fluorescent lights had been particularly brutal that day. Our apartment was in an older building downtown, the kind with thick walls and creaky pipes. I let myself in quietly, already thinking about lying down in a dark room. That's when I heard it. Her laugh, the one she used to give me, coming from our bedroom. Then a male voice, deep and unfamiliar, saying something that made her laugh again. My migraine vanished, replaced by a different kind of pain. I should have burst in, should have confronted them immediately. Instead, I stood frozen in our hallway, listening to the sounds of my marriage ending. The bed creaking, her voice saying things she hadn't said to me in months. Him responding in ways that made it clear this wasn't their first time. I backed out of the apartment as quietly as I'd entered. Sat in my car in the parking garage for an hour, hands shaking on the steering wheel. Part of me wanted to go back up, to see his face, to make a scene. The other part, the part that won, knew I needed to be smart about this. When she came home that evening, she acted perfectly normal. Asked about my day, reheated leftover pasta, scrolled through her phone while we ate in silence. I watched her, this person I'd promised forever to, and realized I was looking at a stranger. I waited 3 days before saying anything. 3 days of acting normal while I figured out what to do. I consulted a lawyer on my lunch break, took notes, asked about adultery clauses in our state. I checked our bank accounts, made copies of statements, transferred my direct deposit to an account she didn't have access to. I documented everything I could think of. On Friday night, I told her I knew. Didn't explain how, didn't give her a chance to construct a lie. Just said I knew about him, about the affair, about how long it had been going on. She went pale for about 3 seconds. Then something shifted in her expression, something cold and calculating. She asked what I expected her to say. I said I expected the truth at minimum, maybe an apology. She laughed, actually laughed, and asked if I thought an apology would fix anything. He was her personal trainer at the gym. 6 months they'd been seeing each other. It started as friendship, then coffee after workouts, then more. She'd been planning to tell me eventually, she claimed, but the timing never felt right. As if there was a right time to detonate someone's life. I asked if she wanted a divorce. She said she wasn't sure yet, that she needed time to think. Time to think. As if I was the one who needed to wait around while she decided between her husband and her affair partner. That's when she said it. The thing that changed everything. She told me I couldn't tell anyone, especially not her parents. She asked what I thought I was going to do anyway. Run to her father and tattle like a child? Her voice was mocking, dismissive. She reminded me that her family had connections, that their lawyer was better than any I could afford, that I'd signed a prenup that left me with basically nothing. I looked at her, really looked at her, and asked what happened to the person I married. She said that person had grown up and realized she wanted more than a boring life with a boring husband who came home at 6 and watched Netflix until bedtime. I told her she was right. I wouldn't run to her parents. Wouldn't tell them anything. She looked relieved, almost smug. Said she was glad I was being reasonable about this, that we could figure things out like adults. Then she grabbed her purse and said she was staying at a friend's place for the weekend, that she needed space. I knew she was going to him. Knew it with absolute certainty. After she left, I sat in our living room and thought about her father. The man who'd given a 30-minute speech at our wedding about the sanctity of marriage and God's plan for families. Who'd pulled me aside during the reception and told me he was trusting me with his daughter's happiness and soul. Who'd made it clear on numerous occasions that divorce was a sin and infidelity was perhaps the worst betrayal possible. I'd never particularly liked him. He was judgmental and rigid and treated his wife like a subordinate. But I knew he loved his daughter in his own twisted way. Knew his reputation and his church standing meant everything to him. Knew that if he discovered what she'd been doing, in explicit detail, with irrefutable proof, it would destroy the perfect image he'd built of her. She'd asked what I was going to do. She'd dare me to do nothing. So I did something. I'd been tracking her location through our shared phone plan. Not because I was controlling, but because we'd set it up years ago for safety and convenience. She'd never thought to turn it off. Saturday evening, I watched the little that represented her move to a hotel on the east side of town. Not even a nice one. A mid-range place near the airport where business people stayed for layovers. I verified she was there. Checked that her car was in the parking lot. Made absolutely certain before I did what I was about to do. Then I created a new email address. Untraceable, anonymous. Spent an hour crafting a message that was simple and devastating. No accusations. No explanations. Just an address, a room number, and a single line about how someone he loved was currently staying there with someone who wasn't her husband. I sent it to his church email, the one listed publicly on their website. Hit send and felt nothing. She called me 20 minutes later. Her voice was panicked, almost hysterical. She asked what I'd done. I said I'd done nothing. She insisted someone must have seen her, must have told her father, because he'd just shown up at the hotel. She was screaming at me through the phone, saying I'd ruined everything, that I'd promised I wouldn't involve her parents. I reminded her that I'd said I wouldn't run to them and tattle. I hadn't. I'd simply provided information. What he chose to do with it was his decision. She hung up on me. Update 1. The fallout was more spectacular than I'd imagined. Her father, being the man he was, didn't just knock on the door and have a quiet conversation. He called her mother. He called her 2 brothers. He called the senior pastor of their church. By the time the confrontation was over, half their congregation probably knew what had happened. She came back to the apartment Sunday night. Her face was blotchy from crying, her eyes red and swollen. She looked like she'd aged 5 years in 2 days. She asked if I was happy now, if destroying her relationship with her family was worth it. I said I hadn't destroyed anything. She'd done that herself when she decided to cheat. She told me her father had called her a whore. Used that exact word. Her mother had cried and asked where they'd gone wrong raising her. Her brothers had threatened to find the guy and beat him senseless. The trainer had apparently run the moment her father showed up. Hadn't even tried to defend her or their relationship. Just grabbed his things and disappeared. She said the church was already talking. That her mother's friends were asking questions. That her father had told her not to come to their house until she'd repented and ended her marriage properly. Properly, meaning admitting fault, asking my forgiveness, going through their church's marriage counseling program. I asked if she wanted to do any of that. She said no. She hated me for what I'd done. Said I was vindictive and cruel, and she hoped I was proud of myself for using her family against her. I told her I'd just done what she said I couldn't do, nothing. I hadn't told anyone anything directly. Hadn't confronted her family. Hadn't said a single word to them. If they'd discovered the truth, that was between her and God, wasn't it? She moved out that night. Took her clothes, her laptop, some books. Left her key on the kitchen counter. Said her lawyer would be in touch. Update 2. The divorce took 8 months. The prenup she'd been so confident about became complicated when adultery entered the picture. Our state had some interesting laws about fault divorces, and her family's lawyer suddenly wasn't so intimidating when faced with documented proof of her affair. I had timestamps, location data, witness testimony from neighbors who'd seen him leaving our apartment, her own admissions during our arguments. She tried to claim I'd invaded her privacy by tracking her phone. My lawyer pointed out that she'd consented to the family plan and never disabled the feature. She tried to say I'd harassed her by sending that email. My lawyer noted that I'd sent nothing. An anonymous person had sent information to another adult, and that wasn't illegal. In the end, we split things more or less down the middle. I kept the apartment since my name was on the lease. She kept her car. We divided our savings. No alimony for either of us. Clean break. But the real damage wasn't financial. Her father still barely spoke to her. Last I heard through mutual acquaintances, she'd left the church entirely, cut off most of her family, moved to another city. The trainer had blocked her on everything and gotten engaged to someone else within 3 months. She'd lost her job at some point. Something about the drama affecting her performance and professionalism. I should feel guilty. Some days I almost do. I think about how one text message unraveled her entire life. How I weaponized her father's religious zealotry against her. How calculated and cold it was. But then I remember her face when she mocked me. When she asked what I was going to do. When she assumed I'd just accept being betrayed and humiliated because I was boring, safe, unremarkable me. I'm not a vindictive person by nature. I'd never done anything like that before. But she'd underestimated what someone will do when they have nothing left to lose and everything to be angry about. Update 3. It's been 2 years now. I've moved on mostly. Started dating again about a year after the divorce was finalized. Nothing serious yet, but I'm not in any hurry. I learned some things about myself through all of this, mainly that I'd been settling for less than I deserved for a long time. I ran into one of her old friends a few months ago at a coffee shop. We talked briefly. She mentioned that my ex had gotten therapy, was working on rebuilding her relationship with her mother at least, if not her father. That she'd learned something from everything that happened, though it had taken her a long time to stop blaming me. The friend asked if I ever regretted it. The text message. The anonymous tip. Bringing her whole world crashing down. I thought about it. Really considered the question. Then I told her the truth. I regretted marrying someone who could betray me so casually. I regretted wasting 4 years on a relationship that meant more to me than it did to her. I regretted not seeing the signs earlier. But the text message? No, I didn't regret that. She'd asked what I was going to do. She'd dare me to do nothing. She'd assumed I'd be the same passive, accommodating person who'd let her walk all over him while she figured out what she wanted. Instead, I'd shown her exactly what I was capable of when pushed far enough. I hadn't yelled, hadn't made threats, hadn't done anything dramatic or violent. I'd simply provided information to someone who had a right to know the truth about what his daughter was doing. Everything that happened after was a consequence of her own choices. I'd just been the catalyst. The friend looked at me strangely and said I'd changed. I told her she was right. I had. When someone shows you who they really are, it changes you too. You either let it break you, or you let it teach you. I'd chosen the latter. She asked if I thought my ex had learned anything. I said I hoped so, but it wasn't my problem anymore. She'd made her choices. Now she had to live with them, just like I had to live with mine. We finished our coffee and went our separate ways. I haven't heard anything about her since. Don't go looking for information. Don't check her social media. Don't ask mutual friends how she's doing. That part of my life is over. Sometimes people ask if I'd do it differently if I could go back. The answer is complicated. Would I prevent the affair? Obviously. Would I have married her at all if I'd known how it would end? Probably not. But given where I was in that moment, after discovering everything, after her mocking challenge, after realizing she thought I was too weak to do anything substantial, I'd send that text again in a heartbeat. Some people might call me vindictive. Others might say I went too far. But she'd gambled on my passivity and lost. She'd assumed her family's money and influence would protect her from consequences. She'd forgotten that information, delivered to the right person at the right time, can be more powerful than any lawyer or prenup. I'm not proud of who I became in those moments. But I'm not ashamed either. I was a man who'd been betrayed, humiliated, and dismissed. And when given the choice between doing nothing and doing something that would matter, I chose action. She'd asked what I was going to do. I'd shown her. And that was answer enough. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with friends or family who might enjoy it too. Your support means a lot. And if you have any thoughts, questions, or story ideas, drop them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next story.